We are coming off a wild Sunday of week 2 fantasy football, and honestly guys, week 1 is the week where everybody overreacts, right? And after week 2 is when people start to actually panic about who they have on their fantasy football roster. And this means that there's going to be lots of great trade values to have after week 2 fantasy football, and we need to take some big swings here. So we need to discuss the top 6 buy low trade targets before week 3 fantasy football. And honestly guys, I think that when I do these trade target videos, it doesn't mean anything unless I actually give you a couple of guys that you can send away in order to get those guys back. So we will do exactly that. With every single player, we'll have a list of players or just a group of guys that you could probably trade for in exchange for these guys. And I will be up all night making sure that this video gets to you on time. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already to show your support for the channel. So let's get into our first guy this week. And honestly, this one may surprise some people. I've got Breece Hall of the New York Jets this week as a good trade for target. So when we think back to last week, in week 1 specifically, the guy was so dominant with only about 15 touches in the game this past week. I mean, he was excellent against the Buffalo Bills, averaged over 12 yards a carry, and this dude was excellent in the receiving game as well. So a lot of people were actually naturally really high on him, and I actually had a lot of people tell me in my audience that they love Breece Hall now. I'd like to hear from those people after week 2, and it's not that I'm out on Breece Hall. I'm telling you to trade for him. But it's very interesting to see how people can flip a switch just like that. And those are the types of people we want to target here. Because obviously Breece Hall against the Dallas Cowboys, it was really, really bad. I mean, I started him in a couple leagues, and of course, I dealt with really bad repercussions. The matchup was bad. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, and the matchup against the Dallas Cowboys is going to be tough for anybody this season. It's going to be a very tough out for anyone. So the problem that most people are going to have here is that he only got 4 rushing opportunities this week. That's bad. I mean, he had 9 rushing yards on 4 attempts, and he didn't catch a single one of his targets. That's the problem here, is the workload is the massive problem in this particular situation with Breece Hall after week 2. There's going to be a lot of people ready to jump ship because there was already questions coming into the week with Breece Hall, right? Like you had questions about Breece Hall and the offense now, the offensive upside without Aaron Rodgers, obviously now with Zach Wilson. There was a lot of people questioning that as well as the injury recovery. Like how often is he going to get touches? Is it going to go up or is it going to go down? Well, it actually went down this week. So there's going to be a lot of people jumping ship right off as fast as they got on board. So to me, this is a prime opportunity to buy low. Send a guy like Alexander Madison. Send a guy like Dameon Pierce. Send a guy like Najee Harris. Those are all guys that I don't think have the upside late season that Breece Hall will. Breece Hall, I actually kind of like what the Jets are doing here because they're slow walking him back into a starting role. And honestly, I think that they saw this matchup against the Cowboys and understood we're not winning this ball game. And then when it got out of hand by the second half, they were like, we're not going to waste this guy right now. So I actually don't mind it at all. They're not going to have a ton of weeks like this against the Dallas Cowboys where they're going to get completely stifled on both phases of the offense. Offensive, like passing and rushing, they're not going to get stifled like that against a lot of other teams. I like Breece Hall. I think he provides you late season value. I think right now you can get him at a very cheap cost than what you would have if you tried to trade for him after week 1. So moving on to our next guy on this list. We've got a quarterback on this list, and I talked about him last week. I absolutely love him. He's on here for 2 straight weeks, and it's Anthony freaking Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. I simply think this is the prime trade target right now in fantasy football. I mean, what's so amazing about what Anthony Richardson just did is that Anthony Richardson literally came into this game versus Houston and left before the second half. The first half was even over. He still had 17.74 fantasy points in week 2 versus the Houston Texans. 6 passing attempts in this particular game, and he had 2 rushing touchdowns as well. This guy is fantasy football lightning right here. This is where we try to find these types of guys early in their careers, because you have a guy like Justin Fields, obviously not doing great, but obviously last year provided you so much value in long stretches. Lamar Jackson in 2019, Jalen Hurts in 2022. There's a lot of these rushing quarterbacks that don't break out as fast as Anthony Richardson is. That's the reality. He left early because of a concussion, so he may or may not play next week. I don't care. This guy has so much long season, late upside that you have to trade for right now because his price is probably as low as it will be the rest of the season. This guy's got the perfect head coach for him. Shane Steichen, last year's offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, had a major hand in developing Jalen Hurts as a thrower. Anthony Richardson is getting the same treatment. I love trading for Anthony Richardson right now. I talked to people who said they picked him up off the waiver wire. If he's on your waiver wire, make sure he's not. Go grab him. But if he is not on your waivers, this is a guy that a lot of people are still uncertain about. And I think you can get away with trading someone like a Kirk Cousins, a Jared Goff. If you sell it the right way, I think you can get away with that type of stuff because this guy is honestly going to be in the tier of guys like Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields before we know it. Now moving down to number 3, our next trade target right here is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, if you've been following me since the offseason, you'll know that this is not surprising. Like, Travis Etienne is my guy. I love Travis Etienne a lot. And week 1, I was vindicated. I was feeling really good, and I was like, man, this guy's going to be a stud all year. Well, he had a down game, as a lot of the great ones do. Obviously, in week 2, against the Kansas City Chiefs, only ran the ball 12 times, 40 rushing yards, only had 2 reception yards on top of that for 5.2 fantasy points in half PPR. So obviously it was a down week for Travis Etienne and for the Jaguars offense as a whole, really, specifically their run game. And here's what I'll say about this. Not only am I confident that Travis Etienne is going to bring you back that value, and his value will skyrocket basically as soon as week 3 is over, but I also think that Kansas City's defense is a lot tougher than we think. I really do believe that. I think that Kansas City's defense is in a situation where we didn't accept how really good they are even last week. And Detroit's got a very good offense. They just put up over 30 points in week 2. Kansas City's got a tough defense, man. And so I don't really make much of this situation here. Obviously, very disappointing considering I thought this would be a high-scoring matchup. Well, it was exactly the opposite. It was a very low-scoring game. Very defensive-minded right here. So I think that Travis Etienne, to me personally, this is a prime buy low opportunity because Travis Etienne is going to rebound very easily in the future. And I think you could still get away with trading someone like a DK Metcalf for Travis Etienne. Someone in that tier of like high-end wide receiver 2s, I think you could still get in exchange for Travis Etienne. I think Travis Etienne is a fantastic trade target this week. Number 4, we're going to AJ Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, man. It's hard to believe how slow of a start he got off to the first 2 weeks of the season, especially after what he did last year. Not only did he have 11.4 fantasy points in week 1, but he also had 4.9 fantasy points in week 2 against the Minnesota Vikings defense that is not good defending the pass. Devonta Smith has looked like a wide receiver 1 in this offense. And honestly, he's great at separating and he gets open a lot. I can understand that because a lot of teams are double teaming AJ Brown right now. Well, here's what I'll say about this. This offense has not gotten it going yet. And I think that one of the main reasons for it is because Jalen Hurts does miss Shane Steichen, who we talked about earlier. And I don't think that Jalen Hurts is dependent on him. What I mean by that is I actually think that he's going to get it going sooner rather than later. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for them to figure out. And AJ Brown's kind of suffered as a result of that. I mean, he caught a touchdown pass in this game versus the Minnesota Vikings that was called back. So it's not like he was just totally irrelevant. He had 6 targets in the game, 4 receptions. I mean, again, not great, but that's what makes him a great trade target right now. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was in the range of Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, pre-draft. Pre-draft is where he was going in fantasy football drafts. Round 2 at the very latest, round 3 if you were super, super lucky. This is a guy I honestly think you could trade a tier lower. Like, I think that you can get an upgrade by selling someone like a Jalen Waddle for AJ Brown. I think you can upgrade DK Metcalf for AJ Brown. I think you could even upgrade Brandon Ayuk for AJ Brown. I love it, man. I think this is a great time to buy AJ Brown because his value is simply going to recover. Remember, fantasy football is like the stock market. AJ Brown just needs one big week for people to realize that he's a great fantasy player again, but we're getting ahead of the curve because we are going to trade for him before week 3. Moving on to our 5th guy, we've got Josh Jacobs here of the Las Vegas Raiders right now. Now, Josh Jacobs, this is kind of a weird situation, honestly, because to me, Josh Jacobs is a clear trade for target, but I understand that there's a lot of people actually starting to get a little bit concerned with Josh Jacobs. I mean, this guy literally averaged negative rushing yards in week 2. We're talking 9 rushes for negative 2 yards. Unbelievably bad. The only thing that saved his week was 6 targets and 51 reception yards through the air. Now, why was that? Obviously, because the Buffalo Bills beat the brakes off of the Las Vegas Raiders in week 2. They couldn't run the ball. They had to throw the ball to catch up. And Josh Jacobs was there. He still showed that he's a very good receiving back. This team is going to get better, and they're going to have better weeks. Buffalo, obviously, in week 2, coming off a bad loss to the Jets, that was never going to be a good matchup for the Raiders here. That was a bad matchup, 100%. Week 1, you never know what happens as well. I think this is a great time to buy Josh Jacobs because his value has never been cheaper as far as this season goes. And this is a guy that already came into the season with a lot of people who had questions on how good Josh Jacobs would be after that kind of year last year, and also how committed he was going to be to this team after the holdout. Josh Jacobs is going to be fine in this offense. They just need a couple more weeks and a couple of better weeks. Taking on Buffalo a week after they just get totally embarrassed, that's not a good recipe, and it clearly wasn't, which is what makes Josh Jacobs such a great trade target. Now we've got Jamar Chase as our number 6 guy to trade for. We're swinging big on this one. Obviously, it's not going to be easy to convince someone to trade their first-round pick to you for lesser value, right? Like Jamar Chase was a top 5 pick in most fantasy platforms this year. He's an excellent player. I mean, these are bad weeks that he's had the past 2 weeks. He only had 5 receptions on 8 targets in week 2 for 31 reception yards, 5.6 fantasy points in half PPR. So there's a lot of issues that people are having with Jamar Chase right now because obviously the Bengals offense hasn't gotten it going yet. T. Higgins had a great game in week 2. Joe Mixon was better in week 2. Joe Burrow was better in week 2. Jamar Chase really wasn't. And so Jamar Chase, his value right now, a lot of people are really irritated that they have him because they drafted him and they know they can't trade him. We're targeting that percent of people who are very nervous and they are trying to sell because they're 0-2 now after 2 weeks of fantasy football. Those are the people that we target here. The guys who drafted Jamar Chase and are 0-2 right now, those are the guys we're going after because they will do anything once they get desperate. And remember what I said at the beginning of the video? This is the week where people start to panic. We send a guy like Jalen Waddle over towards the Jamar Chase owner. We send a guy like DK Metcalf over to the Jamar Chase owner. See what they do, because like I said, we're targeting that little bit of percentage people who are getting nervous and they get very desperate after 2 weeks. This is a move that is absolutely worth taking. The worst anybody can do is say no. So let me know who you are actively targeting and selling away after week 2 fantasy football. And we are going to have our waiver wire video coming up at 1 p.m. Central this afternoon. So make sure to click on that video and watch it when it comes up, and I'll see y'all then.